Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So, it is the beginning of August, which of course means more Xbox Game Pass games. They did just reveal 7 new games for the first half of the month, which includes a couple of interesting day one releases. You always gotta love that. And then Ubisoft, they continue to bring over their AAA games to Game Pass. So we'll go over all 7 of those games here in just a little bit. Also, a very interesting topic surfaced as of recent, and that's the idea of the Xbox Series, the Nintendo Switch, and the PlayStation 5 rising in price. No, not decreasing, but rather get a price hike. And well, all 3 have now officially responded, which might have brought up even more questions. So we'll talk about that and whether or not it's actually possible that, again, these consoles could get a price hike. Before we get started though, I just want to go ahead and remind you all to hit that bell notification and subscribe button below as we do continue to shoot for that 50,000 subscriber mark. Seriously, I can't thank you all enough for all the support that you've given me, but in return, of course, I will continue to try to pump out as much gaming news as I possibly can alongside some other videos to highlight great games. You're definitely not going to miss that, so again, hit that bell notification and subscribe button below. To get started today though, the next big event, Gamescom, is right around the corner. Now Gamescom might not necessarily be as big as it used to be, as it really was once that 1-2 punch after E3, but even then, Gamescom will be back this year as one of the first physical events that we've had in a very, very long time. I think that alone will be very exciting for a lot of people out there to just kind of get that crowd reaction once again. But also, Jeff Keighley is already hyping this event up. Jeff Keighley is, after all, the host of Gamescom for what I believe is the 2nd year in a row, and he claims that they have some exciting game announcements, world premieres, and more at the opening live event on August 23rd. Now, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of Jeff Keighley hosted events, as in my own opinion, I think his events have a tendency of being overly bloated with far too many ads. So I'm not necessarily going to go into this event with just sky-high expectations, but at the same time, what I will say about his events are that they do show a lot of games. So I mean, all in all, there could actually be a few cool surprises here. We might get some updated looks at already announced games, or even completely new games that we've yet to see. He does say that there are world premieres here, so go ahead and mark your calendars for August 23rd. Per usual though, I will update you all once the event is over. Let's go and talk about Digimon Survive again though, because it's not like Bandai Namco has, like, really at all. It's honestly a sad situation because it almost seems like Bandai Namco just kind of sent this game off to die a slow, painful death. The treatment of this game really has been absolutely ridiculous, as it did release last week side by side with Xenoblade 3, you know, one of Nintendo's biggest games of the year. So probably not necessarily a good idea, but to make matters worse here, they didn't even send any review copies out either. So it's getting hardly any coverage at all, and this also seemingly has created some frustration within the community. And that's because Digimon Survive is now being review bombed over on Metacritic. What's interesting about this whole situation is that it's not necessarily because it's a bad game per se, but rather some fans are upset over what type of game it is. It seems like some fans didn't necessarily realize that it was more of a visual novel than a tactics RPG, so they feel that they've been misled by Bandai Namco. Now, that's not actually entirely the case though, because I myself, I have known that it was more of a visual novel for quite some time, as the developers themselves have mentioned in the past throughout some different interviews. I think the problem here, though, is really just the lack of exposure this game has received, and that is on Bandai Namco. This entire situation probably could have been avoided by simply putting out day one reviews, where reviewers could have let fans know that it is a visual novel first and foremost, with the occasional tactics battles. That is, after all, what reviews are for, to educate consumers. But at the end of the day, though, it does continue to look like, if you like visual novels, and if you like Digimon, you'll probably like this game. It does have more of a mature setting with some horror-like elements that fans seem to really be liking, and fans of these type of games, you know, just visual novels as a whole, seems to really be enjoying Digimon Survive. It just seems like Bandai Namco botched the launch of this game, and that goes much further than what we're talking about here. I mean, if you want a physical version of this game as an example, it's been very difficult tracking this game down, especially the Switch version. It's been delayed for a lot of people, myself included, and actually about the Switch version. From my understanding, it actually runs better in handheld mode as opposed to docked, where it does have some frame rate issues. So just kind of keep all that in mind. But let me know in the comments below, if you've been playing through this game, how are you liking Digimon Survive? Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, Xbox did just announce 7 new Game Pass games for the first half of August. So, you know, this isn't even for the entire month yet. There still are absolutely more games coming, but I think things are getting off to a great start here, which I'll kind of describe why here in just a minute. First, though, let's just go take a look at the entire lineup here, which includes Cooking Simulator, Ghost Recon Wildlands, 2 Point Campus, Turbo Golf Racing, Expeditions Rome, Off-World Trading Company, and then Shenzhen Input Output. Now, when you take a look at this is actually a sneaky, exciting lineup because of 2 intriguing day 1 releases. The first of which is Turbo Golf Racing. Interestingly enough, this is actually an Xbox console exclusive, or at least for the time being. You never know how long that's going to last, but it does launch on August 4th. And as you all probably immediately notice, this seems awfully familiar. It's kind of hard not to realize the inspiration from Rocket League. Some of the mechanics look very similar, but instead of soccer, it of course is tackling a completely different sport that'll set itself apart, and that is golf. Now, I absolutely adore Rocket League myself. I used to be very addicted to this game. I think it is incredibly fun, it's unique, and I think that this here looks equally as brilliant. This could actually end up being a lot of fun and maybe even a surprise hit if it turns out to be just as good as it looks. I mean, if you do think about it, this is a very similar launch as to what Rocket League had years ago, with the launching day 1 into PlayStation Plus. After that, really the rest is history. It was just the game that kind of came out of nowhere and absolutely exploded with that boost from PlayStation Plus. And maybe, just maybe, we could see something similar here with Turbo Golf Racing and Xbox Game Pass. Just remember though, if this game does explode in popularity and goes viral in the coming month, you heard it here first. Turbo Golf Racing has the potential, and Game Pass could definitely give it the much needed exposure that it needs to rise in popularity. Whether it will have staying power like Rocket League, that's also going to be very important for a game like this, but again, I think that this game does look incredibly intriguing. The other really interesting day 1 release here, though, is a little bit more of a well-known game, and that's 2 Point Campus. You know, 2 Point Hospital is a very popular and goofy simulation experience where you can manage a hospital. A lot of people really love that game, and now Sega, they're taking that formula and they're injecting it into 2 Point Campus, where you can manage a college out of all things. That's actually a great idea on paper, and I can only imagine some of the things that you can come up with in a college setting. I expect this one to be both humorous and also excellent as the first game was. We do know that that first game was great, so I do expect this one to be really good as well. 2 Point Campus, though, will launch on August 9th. You Game Pass subscribers out there, just continue to be pampered with all of these day 1 releases. As for that crowd that only pays attention to AAA releases, though, by the way, you are missing out if that is the case. But nonetheless, Ubisoft continues their drip feed of Game Pass titles with Ghost Recon Wildlands. This is a little bit of an older title that released back in 2017, but visually, it still looks good to this day, and if you want a big open-world third-person shooter, then Ghost Recon is a good play for that type of experience. The cool part here, though, is that it's actually available today, so if you're interested, go download it right now. I think what I find really interesting about this, though, is that we are seeing this Ubisoft Game Pass partnership continue to manifest. We've really been seeing that all year long, and I think that that will continue throughout 2022. I do imagine that they'll have some other surprises along the way. Maybe we can get some of those newer games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla or even Immortal Phoenix Rising. Now that there, I think, would be a great inclusion that would really give Immortals that exposure that it deserves. We've talked about it in the past, but that is a really good game, and I think Game Pass could actually really help it out a lot. Other than that, though, maybe go check out some of these other games as well, because you never really know what you're going to find in Game Pass. I know it's introduced me to all kinds of games that I wasn't necessarily expecting that I would enjoy, but that there is the beauty of Xbox Game Pass. It just has this way of helping you find your next favorite game. Let's go and shift gears here for a moment, though, as we do have something a little bit more frightening to talk about. And that's the idea of these console makers increasing the price of their consoles. Now, the reason that this discussion is suddenly coming up is because the MetaQuest VR headset just rose in price by $100. This is a very unprecedented situation, as is much of the things that are going on in the world right now. But I don't think that we've ever seen anything quite like this. I know I personally can't recall of a time where a console rose in price like this. You know, we expect quite the opposite over time, in fact. But Meta's logic behind this decision is that because inflation and rising cost of shipping and manufacturing, they need to raise the price by $100. That actually took effect yesterday on August 1st, so instead of the MetaQuest 2 being at $300, it is now officially set at $400. I'll be very interested to see how much that affects the Quest going forward, as it is a less enticing option for fans now, but this does pose the question on whether or not other consoles might do something similar here soon. Obviously, these same problems are probably hitting Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, so it is a reasonable question to ask. And well, all three were indeed asked about this over the last week, and their responses were very interesting. Out of all three, Nintendo's the only one that flat out said, no, we're not increasing our prices. Luckily, everything will remain the same over at Nintendo Land, so big kudos to them being so straightforward about this situation. That's very much appreciated from them. But in the case of PlayStation and Xbox, both of them declined to answer this question for the time being. So they could have actually shut this down, but decided not to do so, which is kind of interesting. It does make it look at the very least they might actually be considering this. With that said though, I'm just going to go and throw my 2 cents in here. Do I think it's actually possible that they could increase price? And for me, I'm never going to just completely 100% rule out anything. The world is just so crazy right now, and we're seeing all kinds of things that you wouldn't expect. So for that reason, I won't just flat out say, no, it's impossible. But I also don't think that it's likely, and the reason for that really just comes down to the beauty of competition. I've preached this time and time again on this channel, but competition is so very important, and because Xbox and PlayStation are so competitive this generation, it puts them in a situation where they have to navigate very carefully. As an example, if Sony came out tomorrow and they said, well, we need to increase the price of the PlayStation 5 by, let's say, $50. Well, that would then put Xbox at a huge advantage. Suddenly, fans would just absolutely flock over to the Xbox Series X as opposed to the PlayStation 5. And the same could be said vice versa. Neither one could make a move like this individually without major repercussions. So for that reason, I'm not expecting a price hike for either console. Yes, it's a tough situation for them, but at the end of the day, they need to stay competitive with each other, and the most important thing for them are to sell games and subscriptions. Well, in order to do something like that, they need to grow their ecosystem, and that might mean having to swallow some console profit. That's why Xbox has always kind of sold their consoles at a loss, because they'll do anything that they possibly can to get consumers within their ecosystem. With MetaQuest, though, it doesn't really have that same competitor that can kind of keep it in check. And I think that that's why they can do something like this. They can more easily get away with a decision like this. No, I don't think that they're going to completely get away with this. I do think that it will affect its sales quite significantly, but I think that that's why they can get away with it just a little bit more. And again, that is the beauty of competition and why fans they need to root for a healthy game industry as opposed to just one console maker just absolutely dominating like we saw last generation. It does affect consumers a lot more dramatically than what they might realize. At the end of the day, like I always say, competition breeds excellence. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, what new game releasing in August of 2022 are you most excited for? And wow, I'm actually a little surprised at the results here in how dramatically Saints Row Reboot won with 40% of the votes. I thought it'd be a little bit closer than this, but yeah, it looks like a lot of you all are really excited for that Saints Row Reboot. Second place, though, was Soul Hackers 2 at 19%. That was the one that I thought was going to be a little closer to the top, but nonetheless, other would be 19%. Then you have Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed at 15%, and then here at the bottom, you have Madden 23 at 6%. Now, as far as these other votes, I did see quite a few of you all mention things like 2 Point Campus. We talked about that a little earlier in the video, and that's definitely an exciting release for the month of August. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga Collection was also brought up quite a bit, and I agree, especially after Shredder's Revenge. That turned out to be a really good game, and yes, Cowabunga Collection looks like a great collection that you can pick up later in the month of August. I think overall, though, the month of August kind of continues that trend that we've seen here in recent months, outside of maybe Nintendo and their JRPGs. That has been a stellar lineup for them, but it does seem like the game industry has just kind of slowed down a little bit here recently. Even then, though, as you can see here, there still are some worthwhile games to keep an eye on for the month of August. As we talked about earlier in the video, there's already a few good-looking Game Pass games to pay attention to, and then with games like Soul Hackers 2, the Cowabunga Collection, and that Saints Row reboot, there's still plenty of games to play throughout the month. I know for me personally, I'm really hoping Soul Hackers 2 turns out to be a good game, but it does appear that most of you all are really excited for that Saints Row reboot. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.